Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a great Christmas. You know what my favorite part of Christmas is that morning after kids have opened presents and all that chaos is done and it gets quiet outside. There's no cars on the road. It's just this nice, calm, peaceful world outside. I feel like we got blessed with it twice this week because the ice storm shut everything down and everybody was sitting the second day on it. It's like 2 Sabbaths in a row. It's a beautiful day. So, I know there's some new people that don't necessarily know who I am, so I thought I would take a minute to tell you who I am. I'm Pastor Rick. I did not grow up in a Christian home, and when I was in high school, I was not a Christian. My dad was an alcoholic, so my home life was pretty rough, and I was a fat kid, so I was teased a lot at school. And so by the time I was like 16, I thought there was 2 conditions that God was. Either God didn't exist, or God was a big bully who was just picking on me. And so one day my friends came to me and they said, hey, we want to go to this Madhouse youth group, which is why our youth group here is called Madhouse. And I said, well, I don't want to go to a church group. And they said, well, there's girls there. And I was like, well, let's go. And I didn't find girls, but I found Jesus there. When I would actually stay there for a number of years. I was a student leader there, and then I became a young adult leader. Then I went on to become an adult volunteer there. And then I was a paid staff while I was going to Cornerstone University in Grand Rapids to get my ministry degree. And so a lot of years I worked with those youth. And a lot of years I heard stories similar to the one I'm about to tell you, where when you first become a Christian, you become very hungry to know who Jesus is. And when I first found Christ, I ran home and I decided I wanted a Bible for the first time, and I really wanted to read about who Jesus was. And so I get the Bible, I put some dust off of it because somebody gave it to me as a present one time, and I just thrown it in the corner. And I remembered from when I was young, my grandma telling me that the words of Jesus were in red. So I picked that book up, I flipped looking for red. I get more than halfway through it and finally find some red, back off, and I start reading the book of Matthew. And I read the words of Jesus for the first time. I read, do unto others as they would do unto you, or loving our enemies. And I just fell in love with Jesus. Just loved him. And so every night before bed, I would take out my Bible and I'd read till my eyes were so tired I couldn't keep them open. And then I would pray and go to bed. And I did that until I read all the way to the New Testament. And I loved it. Revelations was a little tough to get through, but... And then I said, well, I need to read the first part of the Bible. So I go back and I read the beginning, right? Like a prequel. I'm going to read, and I start reading through it. But it felt funny to me. It was difficult, right? In fact, I started to wonder, who's this God that kills off all humanity in a flood because they're sinning? Where's the grace guy that I liked so much? Right? Why would this God ask a man to take his son out and sacrifice him, and then stop him at the last minute? That doesn't seem right. What about telling the Israelites to go out into Canaan and kill every last person to take over that land? Well, that doesn't feel like the same God. And I started to end up in this conflict where I thought, is the Jesus that I read about the same as the God from the Old Testament? And then I started to wonder, is following Jesus the right answer, or am I supposed to do this Old Testament thing with the laws of Moses? That's what happens when you're reading it and you don't have any guidance, right? And so in this conflict that was going on, I decided to pray about it one night. So I pray to God and I say, God, what's the right direction? I just need to know, because now I'm in confusion. I was so solid when I read the New Testament. I just loved it, and now I feel like I'm in conflict. And that night I had one of my, what I call a prophetic dream, where I feel like God sent me a dream. And this was a dream. I was driving down the road in my fancy Chevette. I said Chevette, not Corvette. They were, if you're young, you don't know what that is, but it was a car that was a hatchback, tiny little thing. They called it Vet, hoping that you would get confused and think you were driving a Corvette, but it was not even close. It was pumpkin orange because it was from the 70s. I was always going to put a pumpkin face on the front of it, a jack-o'-lantern face. Never did. But in my dream, I'm driving it on a mountain road, and on my right side is a cliff that goes straight up. And on my left side is kind of a gradual plane that goes down and then it drops off. And I go through a tunnel, and I come out the other side, and the road goes up and it curves around. And I'm driving along, and all of a sudden a semi-truck comes around that corner. And I realize it's a one-lane road. Where am I going to go? I can't go to the right. There's a wall there. So a quick duck to the left. And I hit the brakes and I stop. And the semi goes by me and I go, whew, I made it. And then my car starts to slide down the incline towards the cliff. And I think, I'm going to die. And suddenly my car stops and I look out the window. And there's this huge rock. It looks like the letter I. And I start to look around and I realize it's a Roman numeral, that there's an II and there's an IV and a V. And I go, oh, the Roman numerals. And suddenly the I cracks and I start sliding again. And then I hit another one. That one crumbles and I keep going. And this keeps happening until finally there's no stones left to stop me. And I realize I'm still going towards the cliff face. The only thing between me and falling off is this tiny tree that's dug into the side of the cliff. You know those ones that you see, the roots, they look like fingers just grabbing a hold of it? The tree is gnarly. It doesn't look very strong. It looks like something that can't possibly hold my car. And I think, it doesn't matter. That thing's never going to hold me. My car slides to it. It hits it. The tree kind of wraps around it a little bit. And it creaks and it moans. But it didn't fall. Now, when I woke up the next morning, I realized exactly what the Roman numerals were. Oh, that's the Ten Commandments, right? I've just been reading about those in the Old Testament. But what's this tree thing? And I would go to Madhouse that week, and I would hear the leaders talking about how Jesus is the tree of life. And it all hit me, and I suddenly realized what that dream was about. The laws of Moses would never save me. But the tree could save me. And then I realized what the truth was. I want to tell you that story today because we often live in this state of duality with our Bibles. We like to read it, but we have this difficulty in understanding that part of it feels way different than the other part. And we start to question whether that God from the Old Testament and the New is the same God. Right? It's tough sometimes. It's an honest thing that hits us all. I've heard many young Christians who go back and they start reading the Bible and they go, who's this God of the Old Testament? He doesn't feel right. It doesn't. If your mind is telling you that it's just a difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament, that's not true either. There's a passage in Matthew where Jesus is doing his Sermon on the Mount. And in his sermon, he talks about how if we're even angry, it's not just murder that's a sin, but if we're angry with our brother, and that we should go and apologize to people when we're angry. But then in John, the book of John, Jesus is in the temple and they're selling and they're making money off the temple, and Jesus fashions a whip. And he's chasing people out of there with a whip. We don't teach that one in Sunday school. You know why that is? Can you imagine a bunch of toddlers running around here? You'd be like Jesus. Like, give me a whip. We're going to town. See, even in the church, we start to pick what we want to tell and not tell because we're worried about the influence of some verses, right? What's the right answer, right? Are we not supposed to be angry, or is there times when we can be angry? And the answer is yes, that's true. It's about what situation it is. But my sermon's not about that. What I want you to realize is that we begin this process of what I call a la carte Bible. We start taking the pieces we like and leaving the pieces that don't necessarily fit what we want. Right? Oh, I love the treat others as I want to be treated. That's great. Love my enemies? Susie online has a wrong political view. I don't know if I want to do that one. So I'll leave that one over here. Right? Oh, my worldview. I know some friends that have an alternate lifestyle, right? And I read the Old Testament where it says that's sinful life. And we go, yeah, maybe I won't read that one. That's from the past, right? It's difficult because that's what we start doing. We start picking pieces. And in fact, our churches start to reflect that. We've got like a Baskin-Robbins 31 flavors of churches, right? Everybody's trying to figure out their a la carte of what Bible they're teaching. But there's danger in that. There's so much danger in it. In fact, there's so many of them, it leaves us to think about what Pontius Pilate said when he said, what is truth, right? Which one is the right path? What is the truth of the Bible? What's the right point to have? If you're looking confused, don't worry. I wrote this sermon to make you confused before I get to the end. I'll bring it all together. Just hold on with me, all right? The danger sometimes about the a la carte Bible approach is that it leads us down a dark path. And mine was that when I was young, right? Here I'm studying the Bible. I'm working at this youth group, and I'm thinking I'm teaching about Jesus. And all of my friends at the time, I was the only Christian in the group. They're all like, "Oh, I'm the Christian." And I had this friend, Katrina. Now, Katrina came from a family in a small town where her last name was on everything. Her last name was on the grocery store and on the hardware. Her family owned everything in the town. They also were the major donors of the church. They were at the church all the time, so they were very big in the community that way. And Katrina started to come to Madhouse with us, which seemed like a great thing. But over time, I started to see Katrina change. She started to cut her hair short. She started to wear dark clothes, and she started to believe in alternate lifestyles, and just started this path of going towards these things. And so when I would go and hang out with them, I used to pride myself because she would be like, "Man, I like you, Ricky." I was called Ricky back then. "I like you, Ricky, because you're not like one of those judgmental Christians." And I thought, yeah, that's right. I treat others like they want to be treated. I'm loving my enemies. I'm doing everything right. I'm not like one of those Bible-thumping Christians. I'm not making a whip and beating people out of the temple, right? We pat ourselves on the back, not realizing that sometimes we got to be honest, and it's tough. So Katrina one day asks me, because she's decided to go down the path of an alternate lifestyle, meaning that she believed that man and woman weren't the path for couples. I'm being nice because I know there's some kids in the audience. And so she came to me and asked me what the Bible said about it. I had an opportunity to tell her the truth, but I didn't. Instead, I decided to go a la carte, right? Oh, well, you see, it says this in the Old Testament, but that was a different time period. There's a different culture at that time. And so you may not imply in today's world, right? And I made her feel good. She's like, "Oh, good." Which sounds great and all. Until a few months later when she died in a car accident. And then I had to realize that I had an opportunity to set her straight on the truth, but I didn't do it. C.S. Lewis wrote in his book, The Problem of Pain, "Kindness, merely as such, cares not whether the object becomes good or bad, provided only that it escapes suffering." And in his book, what he's writing about is that we're not saying that kindness isn't part of love, but there's a form of kindness we have in the world where we're just trying to help somebody get past without any hardship from it, right? That's what I was doing with Katrina. I was just giving her what she wanted to hear so she wouldn't hurt. But true love, unfortunately, carries the burden of sometimes telling people what they don't want to hear, because we know that in the end, it's the medicine they need, right? If somebody comes to you with cancer and you hand them a Band-Aid, oh, you'll be fine with that Band-Aid. That's not fixing the problem, right? You're just making them feel better. Sometimes we have to be honest with somebody. We have to be truthful with them. And it's not easy. I know that someday I will stand before my God and I will have to answer for the fact that I didn't take the opportunity to tell Katrina the truth. You see, the danger in that is that when we start a la carting the Bible and we start picking and choosing what we want to teach people, we become false teachers, right? Not just to other people, but to ourselves. Jesus warns us about false teachers. I'm going to read you the verse. It's a terrifying verse. I'm going to be honest with you. I should have done this for a Halloween episode. This comes from Matthew, chapter 7, verses 15 through 23. He said, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from the thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you will recognize them. So he's warning us about false teachers. We get that. That's easy, right? This is the scary part. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. You notice he's not talking to non-believers there. Non-believers don't go out and cast demons in his name. Non-believers aren't out prophesizing in his name. He's talking about us. And that's terrifying. Can you imagine getting there on that day, waiting for the good job, my faithful servant, and hearing, I don't know who you are? That's terrifying. Don't be too scared. I got an answer for you at the end. Don't worry. I won't take you down the road of hardship. But I want it to sink in a little bit. He concludes this. I don't have this in the slides. I added this later, but the last part of this verse actually says, Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house. Yet it did not fall, because it had a foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose up, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. I wanted to read that to you because there's a progression of his thought here through these three paragraphs. He starts out by warning us that there's false teachers, that we can get a false message, and we follow a false message. That false message leads us to go to think that we're all right, and when we get to heaven, him go, I don't know who you are. And he tells us in the conclusion the way we avoid that. We avoid that by building the foundation of our lives on his truth and making sure we're on his truth. Because the sand is the false teaching, right? It's sinking sand. It's moving. Think about what a la carte Bible really is. It's picking and choosing what works for us. But when we pick and choose what works for us, which is the right answer? It's up and down. It's like when the world tells you that you have your own truth. Well, if everybody has their own truth, there is no truth. Truth is a single point. And Jesus is saying in that point, I am that single truth. And you need to be set on me. The difficulty of that question sometimes, and where the sermon came out of, is I was posed a question by Pastor Mike some time ago about, are we once saved, always saved? And by that verse we might go, oh, I don't think we are. I have an answer for you at the end. I'll keep baiting you on so you sit in the room. I might run a little long because it... There's another part of the Bible, though, that's important about this idea, about this back and forth or this idea of duality on how we do things. It's about our actions. Because if we believe the text has duality, we tend to behave in that way as well, right? We tend to go back and forth in things. And it comes from the book of Acts. Now, a man named Ananias, I'll say it right sooner or later, together with Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. With his wife's full knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself, but brought the rest and put it at the apostles' feet. Then Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing? You have not lied just to human beings, but to God. When Ananias heard this, he fell down and died. And great fear seized all who heard what had happened. Then some young men came forward, wrapped up his body, and carried him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her, Tell me, is this the price you and Ananias got for the land? She said, Yes, she said, that is the price. Peter said to her, How could you conspire to test the Spirit of the Lord? Listen, the feet of the men who buried your husband are at the door and will carry you out also. At that moment she fell down at his feet and died. Then the young men came in, and finding her dead, carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Great fear seized the whole church and all who had heard about these events. By the way, this is the time of grace. This is after Jesus' resurrection. This isn't an Old Testament judgment. This is the new and young church. Sometimes we read that verse and we go, what's going on? But I'm going to tell you what's going on. I'm going to explain it this way. Imagine if I stood up here and I said, as Pastor Rick, I have a piece of property. I'm going to go sell it. We'll take all the money. We're going to build us a new kids center here at the church. And everybody goes, yay, Pastor Rick, that's so generous of you. So I go sell the property. And it's worth $200,000. And I make $200,000 at it. And I go, I really kind of want a new camper. Maybe I'll keep $100,000 for myself. And so I come back to the church with just $100,000. I say, look here, I sold it, and I brought all the money for that property here to you. Here's the $100,000. Right? That's what's going on in this story. And Peter doesn't condemn him that he didn't give all the money. He said, why didn't you just be honest about it, right? Peter actually says it. He tells him, well, you had it beforehand. You could have done what you wanted with it. Why didn't you just tell us that that's what you wanted to do? But instead, you brought it here and you lied, not to just us, but to God. And God cast a judgment on that. Because God's setting a precedent about his church. He's saying, when you walk through that door, I want you to be you. Don't be trying to do things to make yourself raised up when you can't really commit to it. We tend to have this duality in our lives a lot of times. I know a lot of people that on Sunday morning are like, life's great. Look how happy we are. Family, fun, la da 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 da. But Monday morning when they get in the car, they're like, why are you driving so slow? Right? Our Sunday morning and our Monday morning are two different people. That's just like lying to the Holy Spirit too, isn't it? If you come into this building and you tell everybody that, look at how perfect a Christian I am, but you're not a perfect Christian, guess what? You're not being honest with us. I want to be honest with you. I'm the least perfect Christian you'll ever meet in your life. I just bumble through it trying to get there. What I want us to realize, and if you're really paying attention, and some of you probably are, you're probably asking this question. I've now taken you through a path where you think, well, if we're not once saved, always saved, and now he's telling us with this that there's an expectation of our behavior. Do we have to work for our salvation? But we've been taught the other way, right? There's verses in the Bible that say the other way. Is Pastor Rick teaching us wrong? I got an answer for you. During the holiday months this year, I was wore out. Oh, I was wore out. My wife and I coached 2 different robotics teams. In fact, we had a competition across the road at Freeland High School in December. We took on the kids' program for Christmas. I had video editing to do. I had a youth group to run. I still work an 8-hour job, by the way. I don't work at the church. I volunteer here. I actually work a 40-hour-a-week job still. And by the time I got done to December, I am just wore out. And I'm going to be honest about my imperfection right now. When I am wore out, I'm a jerk. I'm just telling you. Nothing makes me happy. Why is that dog sniffing so many times instead of just going to the bathroom? Just go to the bathroom. And that's where I was at. And I was just grumbling about everything. And my wife, my poor wife, is tired of hearing me grumble. And she comes to me with some Bible verses. And at first, it's like throwing ice on a hot fire. I'm just like, what? But as that ice cooled that heat that was in me, I started to find the truth of it. And I started to find peace in God's Word. And I had to come back and humble myself and apologize to my wife. And I found myself back in what I call shalom. Now we translate the word shalom in the Bible a lot to peace. And in the English version, peace just means, lack of conflict, right? I'm not in conflict, I'm in peace. But shalom actually means completeness or wholeness. We might in the English language say back to center, right? You ever felt that way? Back to center where you just feel grounded and centered? That's why they greet each other, Shalom, because it's a kind thing to say, hey, I hope you're in Shalom. I hope you're in peace. I hope you're in completeness and wholeness. So with all these things that are going on in our world, all this duality, where we're one person here and one person out there, when we're reading our Bibles and we can't quite feel the pieces fit together right, it creates chaos in our lives. How do we get to Shalom? How do we feel that wholeness and that peace? Well, the Bible tells us how. It's in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 7. It says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings, and by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without a faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteous that is in keeping with faith. You see the answers there? I'm going to tell you what they are. True faith lets us know that the Bible is real. Hebrews 11:3. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what he has seen was not made out of what was visible, right? When we have faith in God, we can pick up that book and any part of it. We have faith that it was put there by God for us and that it is trustworthy. That's what Paul tells us, right? But that comes through faith. True faith pleases God. Hebrews 11:6. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Faith brings us to obedience. And obedience leads us to a life outside the church that looks like God's. You know, one of the craziest things I ever hear from people is, don't say that, we're in a church. I want to be honest with you. God doesn't just have microphones and cameras in this building. He knows what you're doing all the time. He knows what you're doing here. He knows what you're doing at home. He knows what you're doing when you're all by yourself. That's a scary thought some days. But it's true. True faith brings us righteousness. Hebrews 11:7. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is keeping with faith. This, by the way, lines up with Romans 10:9, where Paul writes, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. You see, our salvation isn't based on what we do. It's based on our faith in Christ, right? It's a simple teaching. But what happens when we don't really believe? And that's where we end up with these issues. Because I'm going to be honest with you. If you believe that Jesus Christ was God incarnate, if you believe that he spoke the truth of what your life should be like, if you believe that he died on the cross for your sins, and you believe that he rose from that grave so you would live again, then why don't you believe the rest of it? Then why aren't you living that life? If the Lord of the universe, the God of the universe, the God of all creation told you to live a certain way, why aren't you? The conclusion is that if you're not, maybe you don't believe it like you should. Maybe you don't have the faith you should. You know what happens when you don't have the faith you should? That means you're proclaiming with your mouth He's Jesus, but you don't believe it in your heart. And what happens when you get to His gate one day? He goes, I don't know you because you didn't believe in me. You didn't have faith in me. It's tough for Christians, right? Because we live in a modern world. And we constantly feel the world's pull on us to accept this or to do this. But we can't. We have to stay firm in our beliefs. We have to stay firm in our faith of what God told us to be. And you know why that is? Because when we get rid of that duality, when we stop being one person here and one person out there, when we stop reading the Bible and taking out pieces that don't fit and try to fit pieces that are in, you know what that's like? That's like when you make a puzzle. You're like, I'm going to put a puzzle together. I'm going to do this beautiful puzzle, but I don't like this picture of it, so I'm going to put another puzzle picture in there. It doesn't fit, right? You're banging on the pieces, but it never looks right. It's always out of whack, and it's never built properly. That's what your life is like when you don't bring it all together. But when you take it wholly for all it is, when you take your life and you pattern it after all it is, it all comes together in a beautiful puzzle. And when you see that beautiful picture, guess what you find? You find shalom. As we go into this new year, we all like to make our little things, right? I'm going to lose weight this year. I'm going to do this year. I'm going to do that this year. But you know what should be at the top of all of our lists? I'm going to find shalom this year. I'm going to make sure that my life is patterned after what Christ told me to be. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to find a way to believe every word He said. And let me tell you, if you say, I don't know if I have the faith for that, Rick, if you pray to Him and ask Him for faith, He will give it to you because that's where it comes from. But put it at the top of your list. Seek Him. Seek a life like Him. And you'll find that peace. And I want to leave you with the words that Jesus left His disciples. He said in John 14:27, and I've changed it here for its full effect. He said, Shalom I leave with you. My shalom I give you. Because when you're really believing in Him, when you really have faith in Him, He brings you wholeness, completeness, and peace. I hope you all have a great new year. And shalom.